Okay, we got 15 minutes. I want to ask you about 2022 and inflation. Where do you stand on this? Do you agree with Kathy that we're going to have a fear of a recession and that's going to translate money into growth stocks? Do you think inflation is going to get higher than 6.8% in the next month? Like, how do you think the next 6 months are going to turn out?
It's the most misunderstood quote in the history of quotes, bro. Her inflation quote is literally the most misunderstood quote of all time.
Which quote are you talking about? The transitory thing?
No, she never said transitory. She said deflationary. She
Right.
said that innovation has deflationary characteristics, which will push back on the inflationary trends. And people just misunderstood what she meant completely, which I found kind of amusing. Because I knew this immediately I knew this when people were saying, well, Tom, Kathy would disagrees with everything you just said. It's like, no, she didn't. You just don't understand what she said. Now, I don't presume to be inside her head, and I don't know the lady. I like her a lot. I don't think she's a saint, and I don't think she's a fucking oracle, but she made some really smart calls, and I really appreciate what she's done for the industry. Some people love her, some people hate her. I'm a big fan of her work, even now with everything she went through in the past year.
What did you say that caused people to think Kathy and you disagree? Can you summarize?
Because I'm saying I said in my inflation, how to stop inflation. I said we're going to go to double digits next year.
Okay.
Because they're not doing enough to slow down. So basically, she's talking about well-documented empirical evidence that innovation is deflationary.
Right.
100%. Can't argue with that. That's just fucking factual, bro. When I get excited, my pitch goes like, I watched old Gordon Johnson videos from CNBC.
I did too. I was binging him one night.
His bass was much stronger. He was like Elizabeth Holmes in that shit. And now it's like, his whole bass baritone voice is gone, bro.
His favorite quote is, I think it's grossly overvalued. I'm like, why do you keep saying grossly?
His favorite quote is, are you an analyst? I'm an analyst. I analyze companies. I might do a video called Financial Advice That Aged Like Milk.
That would be a fun video.
I'll let him have a few. Anyways, so she's 100% correct that innovation is deflationary.
Why? And why?
I'll explain in a second. And we're in the midst of one of the biggest innovation waves of the past 20 years. The biggest since the 2000 .com bubble.
Yes.
When you have innovation, I'll give you an example. Okay. Right. Everybody's using Uber. So when you have Uber taking over, what's happening, a lot of the redundancies that were associated with running a cab station are no longer needed. All the back office people who worked in taxi, the mechanics, the dispatchers, whatever, like everybody, like all of these people are now out of business.
Yeah.
So now you have individual drivers that they're doing the job of the cab drivers are out of business. Maybe some of them will become Ubers, but I mean, a lot of them won't. So that's just like one example. There's many other examples. For example, Amazon completely demolished brick and mortar retail.
Right.
I can give you 1,000 examples. But the question is what's the period of time in which that happens? So do you think that this is something that can happen in a single year, in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? So if you look at the 2000 .com bubble and the innovation at birth, we only saw like it truly evolve into what it is today, probably 2012, 2013, like it took a decade and a half. Now, this is going to be much faster now because innovation is exponential, so it's not going to be as long. So probably like good 7-8 years until we see this wave of innovation actually completely cannibalize all businesses.
Right.
And it's going to basically create a deflationary impact if you're looking at it from what's the next decade is going to look like.
Right.
So in 10 years, inflation is not going to be a problem because all of this innovation is going to basically cannibalize these old, outdated businesses. 100% agree with her. The question is, what the fuck are we going to do tomorrow, 2022, 2023, 2024? None of this is happening in the next year or two.
Right.
She wasn't saying that. She was completely talking about a whole different thing. So now we're stuck in the situation where, okay, so now we have CPI 6.8% November. So we're already at end of December. I don't know what the fuck inflation is right now, but let's say CPI, which is already in itself very skewed to show lower numbers than what realistically is inflation. So CPI 7% November, growth of about 0.8% per month. So probably gonna hit double digits quite soon, because the Fed is still buying assets, mortgage-backed securities and T-bonds. Granted, they're buying less of it, but they're still buying.
Yep.
Interest rate is still at zero. So they haven't even started moving, bro. So at least we're gonna have it at least 1% per month for the next few months. So let's say we hit double digits. So we hit double digits, probably February. And then basically you have to look, okay, so will this little increase that they said they'll do in 2022? I don't know how much they said they'll do in 2022. I think 0.3%. I don't know. I don't remember. Let's say 1%. Just for the crazies. Let's say 1%. Will this be enough to slow down an inflation that's already at a, because 10% is a pace. It's not only a number. It's not static. It's just the pace. It's already like a runaway train at 10%. Okay. So a 1% interest rate increase would be enough to stop this runaway train. It's like putting a fucking paper tiger in front of a fucking train, bro. This is exactly what it's going to look like. So there's a very, you can look it up later if you're watching this podcast. It's called the Taylor rule. Taylor rules basically says that you need about 1.5x interest to battle inflation. So if you have a 10% inflation, you need 15% interest to stop that shit. Now, 15% interest is a big problem for the US for many reasons. It happened before. Paul Volcker did this, not the actor from Fast and Furious. Paul Volcker did this in the 80s. I think it cost Jimmy Carter his job when he had to do it in the 80s. But it only works if you combine that with deregulating everything to let the market go crazy and build itself up, and reducing taxes. Basically Reaganism. So battling and that at this point, a lot of people are going to say, what the fuck does have to do with inflation? Well, let me explain. So if you don't raise interest rates, you die by inflation. You're devaluing the dollar. If you're raising interest rates, you're basically causing a recession. And that's exactly what you want to do if you're trying to break runaway inflation. But the problem is, because you're in fucking massive debt, which is the US government, so you're basically causing your debt to be 15% more expensive. How will you pay for this debt? And some people say, well, the US government will go bankrupt. Motherfucker, the US government can't go bankrupt. Fucking cretin. What happens in this situation is the US needs to print more money. Yeah. Because it's now indebted 15% higher per month. So what happens if you print more money? You're back to fucking square one. You didn't jack shit, bro. So all you did is you basically caused the fucking recession, and you just added more 15% money into the system.
So how do you solve this?
Okay, so the only way to solve this, because printing money is a loop. Understand? It's an unsolvable loop. The only way to solve this is how they did it in the 80s. You raise interest rates and you create a fucking roaring 20s fucking kaboom in the market and collect a bunch of tax income to pay for this shit.
But if you raise interest rates, doesn't that not create the kaboom? It has to be coupled with the deregulation.
You have to exactly. If it doesn't come, it has to come with this completely unleashing of the market to go crazy. And the thing is, unfortunately, it's a very hard pill to swallow, because people seem to think that the Laffer curve is bullshit when it's not. The Laffer curve, we're getting like deep into nerd land here.
It's good. I hope people appreciate it.
You can put it on the screen if you edit it. So the Laffer curve basically talks about how much tax you're collecting versus how much your nominal tax rate is. Okay? Okay, yeah, put the Laffer curve, one of them. Put it on the screen. You can make it bigger. Yeah, so this motherfucker was a smart dude. So the Laffer curve is basically, let's just leave it on, whatever. Okay? You see this tax revenue, tax rate. So if you increase tax rate, you increase tax revenue. That is true. However, when you get to T, which is the equilibrium point, you increase taxes, you reduce tax revenue.
Why
And
do
at
you
this
reduce
point,
tax revenue?
well, yeah, your brain is about to explode. How the fuck does what? Well, check this out. Because when you increase tax rate, and this has been empirically proven, there's a lot of yahoos running around saying that this is debatable. This is not, bro. I've spoken to many people who fucking work for different revenue, like tax revenue services around the Western world. So basically, when you increase tax, the nominal tax rate, you incentivize people to, and you give them more resources to put into tax planning, tax evasion, tax avoidance, relocations, and basically get away from the high tax bracket. Because now, if you like, for example, if a corporation is paying 21% in the US, and then you say, well, we're taxing you 40% now, motherfucker. So now my revenue is getting double the tax than it did before. I have way more resources to put into tax planning aggressively to relocate my headquarters and my IP to Ireland or Hong Kong.
Right.
And because the incentive is just too big. The problem with the Laffer curve is that if you go back on the tax rate, these businesses don't come back immediately. It takes 5 or 6 years until they come back. Because if they just fucking move to Ireland, then and you just made an equal rate that what it is in Ireland, they're going to say, well, fuck it, it's the same. We already moved. Fuck you. We're not coming back. Eventually, so it doesn't reverse as fast. It's like getting fat. It's really easy to get fat. Losing weight fucking is a struggle, bro.
Do you think this is why Biden didn't get rid of the Trump tax cuts? Because he knew.
No, he couldn't get the votes. There were luckily enough smart people who fucking cockblocked this, luckily for the US economy. But basically, what they'll need to do when you reduce tax rates and you deregulate the economy, and again, this administration will have if they do it, it's going to be the biggest clusterfuck in history. If this administration does what I'm saying, the problem is that right now the US is basically inside a democratic administration that has a fucking problem to do what I'm saying. So it's the wrong government for this sort of crisis to have. I don't have a political statement about which one is better, Democrats, Republicans. They're all fucking scum, each and every one of them. All politicians are trash. But in this specific scenario where when you need deregulation and increased taxes and increased interest rates to basically save yourself from this fucking inflation runaway train, it's gonna need, somebody will have to be super brave. The thing is, they'll have to work in tandem. Even if Jerome Powell grows a pair and he goes like full on Paul Volcker and commits like political suicide and does what's needed to be done, he still needs the government to fucking deregulate and reduce taxes. Because if they won't, him increasing interest rates will do jack shit. That's the big problem. But it's not the US going bankrupt. Fucking cretins. It's the fact they need look up what happened in the 80s. If you don't believe me, go back and research. I'm not talking to you, to all your viewers. Go back and research Paul Volcker in the 80s, exactly what the government did, what kind of interest. Dude, the man like put in crazy interest rates, but the government worked with him. And that's how basically, like people say Reaganism, like Reaganism was born out of that whole story, bro, with Paul Volcker and everything that happened in the 80s.
So are you not buying stocks then because you're expecting prices to get hit pretty badly in the next 6 months if inflation does get to double digits? Like, are you just waiting, or how do you kind of think of that?
No, I'm buying my high conviction stock. Okay, so here's the thing. Paul Volcker just passed away 2 years ago, and surprisingly enough, his middle name was Adolf. I didn't know that, bro.
I didn't know that either. I did not know that.
Wow, man. That's crazy. Yeah, he was the Fed chair from 79 until 1987.
So
yeah, he was the Fed chair during Reaganism, if you think about it. But that's what saved the US from inflation. US came from a horrible 70s. Most people can remember it, like heavy stagflation in the 70s. And people think, well, Reaganism saved it. No, Paul Volcker with the Reagan administration saved the US economy. There's something similar needs to happen. So I'm buying high conviction stocks. All of my speculative plays, the ones with the like disruptors, not what you would call like people call it growth stocks, like the ones with not a lot of cash flow, which are like long-term bets. Those I'm waiting for next year, because I think the expectation of interest hikes is not aligned with what they'll have to do next year,
Right.
which is not going to be enough anyways, but it will push the market down, provide better prices for me, I think. Again, I might be wrong. I mean, I'm not giving financial advice here. I'm just saying that that's my logic, which I hope is right. But I mean, I've been wrong before.
But
Let's
you
see what
don't see a
happens.
world in which 2022 we actually experience deflation. You think it's here for the next year or two.
No, there's no deflation coming. Sorry, buddy. Not in 2022. In fact, right now we're inside this pool, and there's a little boy pissing on inside the pool from the fucking from the top of the fucking from the jump board, bro. Like literally pissing inside the pool, and we can't get out. That pissing boy is the supply chain shortages. They exacerbate the problem.
Right.
Supply chain shortages in inflationary times is like when you have a fire that you're trying to get a hold of, and some people trying to put out the fire, and you're just adding like lighter fluid. It's just, you can't solve inflation before you take care of supply chain issues. That has to happen as well.
Yeah, that would have to be a big part for us to actually see
It
something.
has to, no. It's like a no starter without supply chain issues being sorted out.
Right.